3 true horror stories that are creepy at Aldi's supermarket. You think you're safe in a grocery store? Think again. It starts out as just another ordinary night, a late grocery run, a quiet shift, a simple task in an empty store. But when the doors lock, when the lights flicker, when a stranger won't stop watching you, that's when the real horror begins. What if you were shopping alone late at night and realized someone was following you all the way home? What if you were the only employee working overnight, only to find out you weren't alone? And what if, during your shift, the doors locked behind you, the power cut out, and someone, or something, was waiting in the dark? These are realistic nightmares, stories that could happen to anyone. And the scariest part? They already have. Tonight, we uncover 3 terrifying encounters that will make you think twice before setting foot in an Aldi after dark. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Johan Horror and turn on notifications, because you never know when the next nightmare might be yours. Now, let's begin. Story 1. The Late-Night Stalker at Aldi. Melissa didn't normally shop this late, but life had a way of throwing off even the best of routines. Between managing 3 kids and a never-ending list of household responsibilities, grocery shopping alone felt like a rare privilege. The Aldi near her house was only a short drive away, and with it being close to closing time, she figured the store would be nearly empty. Exactly the kind of quiet, no-stress shopping trip she needed. As she pulled into the parking lot, the place was just as deserted as she'd expected. A few scattered cars sat beneath the dim glow of the streetlights, and the inside of the store looked eerily vacant. She grabbed a cart, took a deep breath of the cool night air, and walked in, letting the automatic doors slide shut behind her. Melissa moved quickly through the aisles, checking off items from her list. She was in the cereal aisle when she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. It prickled at the back of her neck, sending a shiver down her spine. Before she could turn around, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, miss?" She startled, whipping around to find a tall man standing uncomfortably close. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, with a wiry build and an unsettling grin. A red hoodie draped over his frame, the hood pulled up slightly to shadow his face. A faded baseball cap sat low over his eyes, and his jeans were worn and baggy. "Sorry to scare you," he chuckled, his breath reeking of something stale. "I was just wondering where you found those chips in your cart. I've been looking everywhere for them." Melissa hesitated. The way he was standing, so close yet angled like he was trying to block her path, made her uneasy. But she forced a polite smile. "Oh, they're just down that aisle," she said, pointing. "Really? I looked there. Maybe I missed them." His grin didn't falter. Melissa figured the quickest way to shake the encounter was to just show him. She left her cart for a moment and walked a few feet down the aisle, gesturing toward the shelf. "Here they are. Look. Guess I just wasn't looking hard enough." He took a bag but didn't walk away. Instead, he lingered, launching into an awkward monologue about why he liked this specific brand. Something about how they didn't use artificial flavoring. Melissa nodded stiffly, inching away. "We'll have a good night," she said firmly, heading back to her cart. But he followed her. At first, he kept talking, filling the air with pointless chatter, but when she stopped responding, his tone shifted. "You're really pretty, you know that?" Melissa's stomach twisted. She forced out a quick thanks and turned her cart down the next aisle, hoping that was the end of it. But as she continued shopping, she saw him again, and again. No matter what aisle she turned into, he wasn't far behind. He wasn't shopping, he wasn't picking anything up or looking at shelves. He was just walking, his hands buried in his hoodie pocket, his head slightly tilted as he watched her. The store was almost empty now, with only a handful of other customers scattered about. The few employees left were focused on restocking shelves, oblivious to Melissa's growing panic. She gripped her cart tightly, speeding up. Just ignore him, finish shopping, get out. By the time she reached checkout, her pulse was hammering in her ears. She breathed a small sigh of relief when she didn't see him behind her. Maybe he had finally given up. But then, "Have a good night, ma'am." Her breath caught. He was there, standing directly behind her in line, his arms empty except for 2 measly items. Melissa kept her face neutral, pretending not to hear. She quickly paid for her groceries, grabbed her bags, and rushed outside. The night air was cool, but it did little to calm her. As she loaded the last bag into her trunk, she glanced toward the entrance. The man had exited the store, but he wasn't heading to his car. He was standing there, watching her. She slammed her trunk shut, hurried into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. Her hands trembled as she started the engine, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The man walked slowly across the lot toward an old, beaten-up Honda parked a few spaces away. He got in, but he didn't turn the car on. He just sat there, watching. Melissa didn't wait. She backed out of the parking lot and sped off, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. She checked her mirrors constantly, looking for headlights trailing her, but saw nothing. Only when she turned onto her street did her heartbeat begin to settle. She pulled into her driveway, exhaling. Safe, home, it's over. But just as she was about to step out of the car, a shadow passed by her window. Her heart lurched. A car, driving slowly down the street, headlights off. Her breath hitched as the car crawled past her house, moving almost eerily slow. Melissa sat frozen as it stopped a few houses down. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The driver's side window was too dark to see into. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the car finally rolled away, disappearing into the night. Shaken, Melissa darted inside, locking every door behind her. "Jake?" she called out, her voice tight. Her husband came downstairs, concern immediately crossing his face. "What's wrong?" Melissa took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "I think someone followed me home." Jake's expression darkened. Without hesitation, he stepped outside onto the porch, scanning the street. But the car was gone. A week passed and Melissa did her best to shake the feeling of unease. Maybe she had overreacted. Maybe it was just paranoia. Then, late one night, she and Jake were jolted awake by a noise outside. Shuffling. Jake grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed and crept toward the window. Someone was in their yard. He peered outside, barely daring to breathe. There, standing at the side gate, was a figure. Melissa's blood turned ice cold as Jake slowly slid open the window. The figure snapped its head up and bolted. Jake didn't hesitate. He ran outside, bat in hand, his voice booming through the night. The intruder was already sprinting, disappearing into the shadows. But just before he vanished, Melissa saw something under the streetlight. A red hoodie, a baseball cap, and a same old beat-up Honda peeling off into the night. The police arrived quickly after their call, but the man was gone. They never saw him again. But the thought still lingers in Melissa's mind to this day. He knows where she lives. Story 2. The Stranger in the Locked Aldi. Nick had never liked the idea of working the overnight shift. The thought of wandering the dark aisles of Aldi long after the last customers had left sent an uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. But money was money, and as a broke college student, he didn't have the luxury of turning down shifts. So, when his manager called, asking if he could cover the midnight to 8 a.m. stocking shift alone, after his coworker called out sick, Nick reluctantly agreed. At first, the night seemed peaceful. The store was empty except for the occasional flickering of overhead lights, the soft hum of refrigeration units, and the rhythmic squeaking of his cart as he wheeled pallets of groceries down the aisles. But then, something felt off. It started with the smallest thing. A sound. A faint click. Like a door locking. Nick paused, glancing around. The automatic doors at the front of the store were shut, their glass panels reflecting the dim interior lights. That was normal. The doors locked automatically after closing. But then he noticed something. Movement near the entrance. A man stood there. Nick hadn't seen him enter. He was tall and bald, dressed in khakis and a dark zip-up jacket. A thick keyring jingled from his belt loop, heavy with at least a dozen keys. He carried a small backpack in one hand and had a strange, detached expression, like he was just observing. Nick hesitated before approaching. "Hey, are you the night manager?" he asked. The man turned to him, his lips curling into a small, almost amused smile. "Yep, that's me." He reached out, shaking Nick's hand firmly. Nick frowned slightly. His real manager, Rob, was supposed to be here tonight, and he had never seen this guy before. Rob told me I'd be working alone, Nick said carefully. The man's smile never faltered. Change of plans. I need you to head to the back warehouse and start organizing pallets. I'll keep an eye on the front. Something about his voice. It was calm, steady, and yet wrong. Nick hesitated. He had no reason to argue. But as he turned to head toward the warehouse, something made him glance back. The man was standing by the entrance doors, reaching toward the side panel. It took Nick a second to realize he was manually locking them. Are you? A pit formed in his stomach. He walked toward the back, his heart pounding a little harder now. He needed to find Rob. When he pushed open the warehouse doors, he exhaled in relief. Rob was there. A tall man in his 30s, wearing his usual blue Aldi vest. He looked up from where he was organizing stock. "What's up?" Nick frowned. "I thought you weren't coming in tonight." Rob raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about? I've been here since 10. Nick's skin prickled. "The guy up front, the one locking the doors, he said he was the manager." Rob's expression darkened immediately. "What guy?" Nick's mouth went dry. Tall, bald, had keys. Before he could finish, the lights cut out. Total darkness swallowed the store. Nick's breath caught. The only illumination came from the dairy aisle coolers, casting an eerie bluish glow against the shelves. Rob didn't hesitate. "Stay here," he whispered. "I'll check it out." Nick wasn't sure if that was a good idea, but he didn't argue. He watched as Rob disappeared through the warehouse doors and into the dark store. Silence. The seconds stretched on. Then, footsteps. Not from where Rob had gone. From behind him. Nick froze. A slow, deliberate shuffle, moving closer. Then, a voice. "Hey, kid, you in here?" Nick's entire body tensed. That wasn't Rob. That was the man. And he was inside the warehouse. Nick bolted. He sprinted through the darkness, pushing through the warehouse doors and back into the main store. His eyes darted around, searching. Where was Rob? Nick's breathing was ragged as he made a beeline for the exit. He reached the front doors and yanked. Locked. Panic surged through him. A presence loomed behind him. Nick spun around just in time to see Rob emerging from the aisles, his face pale. He saw Nick, then immediately turned to the panel near the entrance, flipping the emergency lock. The doors slid open. "Go," Rob ordered. Nick didn't need to be told twice. He stumbled through the exit, Rob right behind him. The moment they were outside, Rob grabbed his phone and called the police. Nick stood there, his pulse hammering in his ears, staring back at the store. The man was still inside, somewhere, waiting. The police arrived in minutes. The security footage told the real horror story. The bald man had arrived shortly after closing, walking directly to the entrance without hesitation. He had unlocked the doors from the outside and never left. He had lurked, hiding in blind spots, watching Nick. Then, when Nick entered the warehouse, he cut the power. His intent, still unknown. But the most disturbing thing? The footage showed the man leaving the store through an emergency exit, long before the police arrived. They never caught him. Nick never worked another overnight shift again. Story 3. The Aldi Intruder. Ethan had always preferred the night shift. Something about working in the quiet, empty aisles of Aldi made the job feel easier. No customers to deal with, no supervisors breathing down his neck. It was just him, the shelves, and the steady hum of the refrigerators. But that night, the store didn't feel empty. It started with something small, a feeling, a creeping unease that prickled at the back of his neck. He wasn't supposed to be alone that night. His coworker Carter was scheduled to join him for the shift, but by 10:30 p.m. Carter was still a no-show. Ethan figured he was running late. He propped open the back door just enough so Carter could slip in when he arrived, and went back to unloading pallets. 30 minutes passed, then 40, still no Carter. And then, the back door was shut. Ethan frowned. He knew for a fact he hadn't closed it. Maybe Carter had come in and closed it behind him? He walked to the back storage room, expecting to see his coworker there. Nothing. The doorstop that had been wedged under the door was now outside, lying on the pavement. A deep, uneasy feeling settled in Ethan's gut. Had the wind blown it shut? Or had someone kicked it out? The rational part of his brain told him it was nothing, but another part, the part that sensed when something was wrong, told him to pay attention. He grabbed his box cutter, flipping it open in his pocket, just in case. Then, a noise. A dull thud from somewhere on the shopping floor. Ethan froze. He was the only one here, right? His fingers tightened around the box cutter as he stepped out of the back storage area and into the aisles. The store was dark except for the dim glow of the refrigeration units lining the walls. The aisle stretched before him, long and empty. He turned his head slowly, left, then right. That's when he saw him. A man, dressed in all black. Standing at the far end of the store, partially obscured by the shelving units, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The man wasn't shopping, he wasn't an employee. And worst of all, he was staring directly at Ethan. Not moving, just watching. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. "Hey!" "Store's closed," he called out, trying to sound authoritative. The man didn't respond. Instead, he stepped behind the shelf, disappearing from view. Ethan exhaled sharply, his grip tightening on the box cutter. Okay, this was officially bad. He wasn't being paid enough to deal with this. He pulled out his phone, opening his boss's contact. Another noise. Closer this time. A rustling, like someone shifting against metal. Ethan turned his head sharply. There. The man was back, peering at him from another aisle. But this time he was smiling. Ethan's stomach twisted. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, his lips stretched unnaturally, like someone who had just heard a twisted joke that only they understood. And then, the man waved. A slow, deliberate gesture, as if inviting Ethan to come closer. Ethan felt an icy shiver crawl up his spine. Nope, nope. He turned and sprinted for the front of the store. The automatic doors were locked for the night, but there was an override switch near the entrance. As he reached for it, the lights cut out. Total darkness. Ethan's breath came fast and shallow. He fumbled for his phone, switching on the flashlight. The beam of light barely cut through the eerie darkness. Something moved. A shadow. Too close. Ethan spun around. The man was right there, less than 10 feet away. Still smiling. Still waving. Ethan stumbled back, his phone trembling in his grip. He slammed his hand against the emergency door switch. Nothing happened. He hit it again. Still nothing. A whisper of laughter drifted from the dark. Low, soft, coming from the man. That's when Ethan did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He bolted past the checkout lanes, past the dark shelves, back toward the rear of the store. His only way out now was the warehouse exit. He pushed through the swinging doors and slammed right into Carter. Ethan yelped in shock. Carter grabbed his shoulders. "Dude, what the hell?" Ethan could barely get the words out. There's someone in the store." Bang. A loud crash from the aisles. Both men froze. The intruder wasn't gone, and he was getting angry. Ethan didn't waste time explaining. He grabbed Carter's arm and yanked him toward the back exit. But when they reached it, the door wouldn't open. The latch was jammed. Carter pounded on it. "Are you kidding me?" Footsteps. Fast, getting closer. Ethan whipped around, his phone's flashlight trembling in his hands. The man stepped into the warehouse doorway. His eyes locked onto Ethan's. His grin had grown. "Just looking for a snack," the man whispered. Ethan's blood ran cold. Carter grabbed a metal rod from a shelf and swung it. The man darted away before the impact landed. Carter didn't hesitate. He smashed the emergency exit alarm. A piercing siren shrieked through the warehouse. For the first time, the intruder's grin faltered. A moment of hesitation, and then he ran, right back into the store. Ethan and Carter burst through the now unlocked door, stumbling into the alley behind Aldi. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights filled the night as police arrived. But by the time they searched the store, the man was gone. No sign of him. No forced entry. And yet, the security cameras confirmed he had been inside the entire time. Lurking, watching, waiting. Ethan never worked another night shift again. Lessons from the shadows of Aldi. These real-life horror stories prove that danger can lurk in the most familiar places. Melissa's story teaches us to trust our instincts. You don't owe anyone politeness if they make you uncomfortable. Nick's terrifying night shift reminds us that not everyone in authority can be trusted. Always verify before following orders. Ethan's chilling encounter shows the importance of staying aware and acting fast. Ignoring red flags can be deadly. Stay alert, trust your gut, never ignore the warning signs. If these stories gave you chills, there's more to come. Subscribe to Johan Horror for more real-life horror. Turn on notifications, because the next nightmare could be yours. See you in the next story, if you dare.